Glember, The Tale of a Monster. Written, recorded, and illustrated by A.K. Brookman. Chapter 3. The Spine of a Man. Continued. Day 4. I've traveled on horseback countless times. It is quite swift in comparison with the foot. Sassy, of course, was mainly used for herding cattle. She was never a workhorse, a pack horse, nor a running steed. I like to think of her as a friend. But back to the speed. It was nothing in comparison to the river as it rushed to the north. The river does not fatigue. It need not sleep, nor rest, nor eat. Mountains moved by us rapidly throughout the fourth day, and in little time we passed even Marnting. My legs began to ache. There is, of course, little room to stretch on a raft, only large enough for two. Nor is the wood a comfort against the skin. That was a very long day. The goggle produced some sappy substance and smeared it over his body, and then he did the same to me. I think it was to protect from the sun. I never asked. It seemed ridiculous to offer it when he planned to kill me. And so the fourth day came and went, much as the third. We floated ever north, the raft spinning one way and then the next when the goggle rested from guiding it. The night tottered by. Occasionally I woke as the spray of the river splashed over my face. At other times we struck solid a rock and only slowly moved around it. Other times we held on dearly for life in the torpid waters, and other times we drifted slowly and easily along. I began to wonder just how far we were from my home. The familiar sounds of the night and its creatures and winds were gone now. The sound of the nearby trees made as the wind moved through them became foreign. At times I convinced myself even the stars shifted in their lofty height. I closed my eyes. The goggle had said something about smooth passage for some time. When did he ever sleep, I wondered. I didn't care. Like the raft and my spirit, I drifted away. Thus far, my death march adventure, dare one call it such, had been, although eventful, increasingly dampening to the spirit. That was all about to change. Day 5. The morning unfolded from clouds of night and fatigue as I lifted my lids. The raft upon which I lay vibrated softly as the waters rushed against and over a corner not far from my eyes. The torment of inner resignation flooded over me more so as I recalled my predicament, and I was saddened to have left the comforting arms of sleep. As I rose from the raft, finding it partly banked at last, a hand stifled my ascent, or rather, a claw. I remained motionless a moment as the gesture bid. I further noted the middle finger of the three gracing my captor's hand pointed into the distance. I followed it, finding a great ravine bear standing high on two legs testing the morning air. I suppose we had the misfortune of happening upon its fishing grounds. Snorting and growling, it seemed reluctant to share its territory. "Shh," the goggle whispered, reaching slowly for his blade. Perhaps I had not mentioned it before. It was a wicked and crude-looking weapon. Still, it appeared quite well-edged and strong. My late-taken disenchantment with life dissolved then as the ravine bear suddenly rushed in our direction. The goggle leaped from the raft, his jarring motion causing it to dip beneath the flow and thoroughly soaking me with the cold waters. Had I not been entirely awake, that would have completed the task. The raft turned as it came back to the surface, but abruptly ceased its movement. It was anchored somewhere, but I could not see the source. Of course, I was somewhat preoccupied with the massive bear closing in on us, I must admit. The goggle landed on the bank and managed another several paces before halting and throwing his arms out wide to scream. The bear slowed its charge only momentarily, accepting the challenge. Then it resumed its rush, heading direct for the goggle. "Eat him, please," I muttered, turning from them to look frantically for the tie I could loose to free the raft. I cared little where the river took me, as long as it was free of the goggle's clutches, yet I could not find it. It mattered little, I realized. My mind finally deciphered the sound of the distant falls. Looking downriver, I found this tributary dropped off into the great depths of a chasm. There would be no escape with the raft. Too, it was then that I heard the distant conversation that was heightening as I turned toward it. Two men were walking our way in the distance, indeed following the river bank. The wind, an unfortunate companion to a sodden prisoner as myself, brought their broken words my direction, though I doubted they would hear a word of my own, were I to call out to them. Still, it appeared they could see me, though they were some distance away. I suppose, in retrospect, I should have recognized them. Few traveled the fars, and those who did were either well equipped to do so, or were insane. Their simple gray robes were characteristic of the wizards of Nye. They carried their walking staves, known their order. In the excitement, and for the fact that I had rarely seen them before, I mistook them for common travelers. Throwing my arms out wide as the gargoyle stopped before the bear, I made every attempt to gain their attention, had I not already. It all happened so quickly, I didn't realize until I stumbled that my foot had been tied to the raft. I nearly threw my arms out before me in my dreariness, but stopped just short of breaking the tension in the chains locking my wrists to the contraption on my back. As I writhed about in the manner necessary to regain my feet with the contraption's limitations, I saw the gargoyle do something I'd not believe possible had I not witnessed it myself. The great ravine bear stopped just before the gargoyle and lifted high upon its 2 legs. The gargoyle had found a small rise in the terrain and stood atop it, shoving his blade into the earth. As the bear came down, it batted at the gargoyle with 2 mean swipes, one after the other. The gargoyle braced himself one direction as he lunged backward, still keeping the firm grip on the blade, and one of the swipes passed just before him, lopping off the bear's arm as it did. The second swipe came only an instant later, yet it was enough time for the gargoyle to twist the blade and buttress it once more with all his weight as he threw his body back again. He managed to bend free of the swipe, while keeping the blade anchored in the earth and supported at its hilt a second time, and the second claw was lopped off as the first. The bear came down in a roar of rage and agony. It stumbled repeatedly, attempting to regain its stance without success, and roaring and wincing for the effort. The gargoyle rose slowly, pulling free his blade from its grip in the earth. It had happened so quickly, I thought the gargoyle surely bathing in the moment of his demise. A moment later, he stood over the greatest bear in all the realm, staring down upon it as though it were a mere curiosity. He did not wait long or seem to enjoy his success. Rather, he was waiting for his chance to lunge. Taking it, he waded in and grunted with one last great swipe. It did not remove the head, but it may as well have. The bear staggered backwards and fell. It jerked only a few more times before it stilled, its neck torn wide and leaking its lifeblood into the soil. The wizards were closing in more rapidly, it seemed. They had quickened their pace, I noticed, just as I loosed the tie holding my ankle fast. I stepped off the raft and onto the soft bank just as the gargoyle turned my way. "We will need the furs soon," the gargoyle said loudly. We were fortunate this day. Had I been more skilled, or more in control of my fears, I might not have turned then toward the wizards as they approached. I might have bought them more time in closing the distance to us. However, I couldn't resist looking their way. The gargoyle followed my gaze and spotted them. I doubted I could manage the distance to the travelers before the gargoyle reached me, but I was willing to take that risk. Just as I made the decision to do so, I felt a sharp and agonizing burn in my leg. I looked down and discovered a dart lodged into the muscle. My first instinct was to pull it free, and I did so. A thick stream of blood began to pour down my leg, and I saw the barbed tip of the dart. The pain seared into me, greater than such a puncture should. Where had it come from, I wondered. I looked up and toward the gargoyle, who was heading my direction. I looked toward the wizards, who were making their way my direction as well, using their staves as walking sticks. Neither appeared to have sent it at me. I suddenly began to feel very dizzy, very weak. I took a step. I remember knowing that I needed to move, and quickly, but I could not recall why at that moment. The earth began to spin around me, and I had to drop to the ground to prevent myself from falling. I felt as though I was going to vomit. Everything was spinning so rapidly, I could not discern direction, and suddenly everything went dark. Chapter 4. Rockshade Cave. Day 6. Every 10 days or so, my father would go to town, and on those days my brothers and I would wake early, partly because we had my father's chores to do as well as our own, but also because it was on those days that we would sneak off to Rockshade Cave, cradled partway up Sved's Peak. Although it was not a place unknown to my father, it was on more than one occasion inhabited by some creature. Our parents would not allow us to go there alone, yet we would pack gargane bread and a candle and fill one of our father's skins with water. He would not be back until the following morning, insisting we were working in the fields. We'd make our way to the cave where we told stories and yelled just to hear the echo back at us. My oldest brother was much more daring than I, more daring than my other brother as well. One day, there in Rockshade Cave, he told us about the hideous gargles that hunted boys in the night. He told us they often crept into farmhouses and stole children while they slept. I remember that I could not sleep well for some time after that tale. It was on that particular day that my oldest brother took a red rock and drew a claw on the cave wall. He looked at us and said, "That is what the gargle's claw looks like." There were 3 fingers, 3 bent red fingers. Well, there he put it on that cave wall, and there it remains as far as I know to this day. It was ever there in the back, hidden where only fire or a candle's light may reveal it. I used to run my fingers over it and wonder if it was true. The first thing I remember was vomiting. I don't know if I woke from it, or if that was just the point at which my mind lifted free of the bonds of confusion. "Easy, my friend," I heard a voice say. A hand came to my shoulder, and I looked up, at first staggering back in horror on instinct. A gray-robed man looked from me to his companion, then back to me. "Wait," the second man said, drawing nearer. "Are you well, man?" he asked. My entire body hurt. My head was throbbing with pain, and I could not fully open one of my eyes. As I took in a deep breath, I felt a sharp pain to my left side. As I winced, the pain intensified. Surely I had broken a rib or two. I looked up. "I hurt everywhere," I managed to say. I could feel dirt in my mouth, and spit some of it out. It graced the earth mixed with clots of blood. The gash on the back of my hand had reopened, and blood was trailing down my arm. I remembered the dart, and looked to my leg. The site was moist, but no longer bleeding. Some time had passed, I realized. What had happened? "You took quite a beating," the second man said, sitting beside me. "Yet you are safe now," he assured me. The first man began to look around and into the distance. Satisfied, he turned back to me. "What brings you here?" he asked. "And how did that gargle manage to capture you?" I shook my head. Even that was met with pain. I had to take small breaths just to get the air in. "I was working in my field," I answered. "He took me." I coughed, and blood sprayed my legs and the earth before me. "Dragged me here," I managed. "Damned creatures," the first man said. "We'll kill it if we get the chance." "Good," I managed. "Good." "You should lie down," the second man encouraged. And I realized I was sitting partly on a bedroll. We were in a small, forested clearing well blocked by thick brambleweed brush on all sides. "We will keep watch in shifts," the second man added. "Get some rest. You're safe now." I did not argue. Indeed, I was already falling asleep. Day 7. On the 7th day, I opened my eyes to find the sun peeking over the distant horizon. I watched her pink fingers reach across the sky like heaven's blood. If I had been completely numb or careless, I might not have been touched by it. The play of the world began to whisper, and it seemed as though my aged eyes had been restored to that youthful intrigue wonder presents the lidless eyes. It was not that I began to view the interplay more deeply, so close to death as I was, but that the curtains of falsehood began to draw back, let lay in the light that truth grants the free. Even my hand before my eyes may appear foreign as I turned it. The little insignificant things began to crawl away like spiders. The important ones began to settle in beside me. I could recall arguments I had on past with my siblings, controversies that rang out in the town I lived that were provoked by what? These things dripped away like the blood I had late lent the earth. My family. That was all that mattered now. I turned my head to see the gargle sitting on a fallen tree. He was eating something. "What?" I began. "You live," the gargle stated, eyeing me over and standing. "Good, we move," he said. I looked around. I was no longer in the clearing with the brambleweeds and the 2 wizards of Nye. "Gargle," I asked, "where are the wizards?" The gargle shrugged. "Dead, if there is any natural justice," he began casually. Then he turned suspiciously to me. "So, you know who they are?" Of course I knew of them. The protectors of the realm. Those who serve to bring peace to the cities of Meristheria. They were not often seen, but frequently thanked for ridding this or that beast, or helping this or that city on the brink of starvation. They oversaw the Meristherian Guard, and organized and comprised the Council of Nye. Everyone knew them. Of course, I answered. What happened to them? I asked, narrowing my eyes at the gargle. What did you do, Gargle? The gargle studied me. You don't remember? He asked. I said nothing. He looked me over as though looking for a weapon. I noticed the contraption was fastened to me once again. It was not on me when I was with the wizards. What did you do, Gargle? I asked again. I knew why Lily was as stubborn as she was. I was beginning to learn why she feared nothing. Gargle, I asked again, although the beast yet remained motionless a time. I do not know, the gargle said, although I gathered he was hiding something. His words and tone belied deception. And it's Glember, he added, tossing me a staff. My name is Glember. I looked the staff over. I had no misconceptions about it. The staff was covered in dried blood. I looked from the staff to the gargle. It belonged to one of the wizards. To touch it was to die, rumors told. Well, something died so I could touch it. That much looked obvious. I said we move, Glember said with a venomous tone. I looked around as I turned and bent and fought to stand. The pain in my ribs was even greater than before. My face was even more swollen than I remembered. The staff, however, was a boon. Its assistance in helping me to my feet was quite real. I saw nothing, stilling a view of the surrounding terrain. I had watched Glember slay a bear in mere moments. I suppose even the wizards of Nye were no match for him. Day 8. On the 8th day, we marched northward. We rested often. Even the gargle walked with a slight limp. Somehow, he'd been hurt, and I enjoyed watching him climb over the larger stones with pain. I hope they struck him hard before they died, I remember thinking. Still, I never let the gargle catch my smile. I still planned to change him if I could. And despite the turmoil, the dire position, we were back to speaking, and I knew his name. It was something, I consoled myself. I even held one of the staves of the wizards of Nye, no common twig, and yet I'd not been allowed to even carry a twig a few days ago. I don't think the gargle was even aware of it, but I was certain I was gaining his trust. Perhaps it was the poison, perhaps it was desperation, yet it was all I had. I was little able to eat throughout the day. Although we often passed young and ill plants, I could but nibble. I vomited often and became dizzy even more frequently. It was the poison, Glember assured me. It makes you dizzy and weak for days, it seems, and sometimes, he said with a grin, you recover what happened. I studied him, but his face grew expressionless almost as quickly as the grin came. Sometimes, he repeated. Day 9. The heat was insufferable on the 9th day. We'd been walking for days. I could keep little water down despite the various water holes and plants Glember made use of to fill his traveling skin. I was yet victim to the days of the poison, and the compounded heat was rendering me too weak for travel. You could end it now, Glember suggested, watching me struggle. I did not even look to him. I wanted to walk until I passed out. I wanted it to be a legitimate end to our travels, that he would see my pain and suffer for it. I'd been making steady ground. I would not give up. Just reach out your arms, Glember added slyly. Or swing that staff at me, he prodded. Who knows? You just may hit me. He was grinning, I knew. I could hear the grin in his voice, but I did not look his way. I kept walking. The view before me had begun to sway, although I walked steadily. I knew I had little longer. Maybe it would be that last fall. Maybe it would be the end of mornings for me. Suddenly, Glember stopped. He knew I couldn't go on much further, yet I suspect he did not want to offer me a rest. That would make him sound weak or considerate. I wanted to press the matter. Keep up, Glember, I said, although the words were somewhat odd. They were slurred. I was getting weak indeed. I don't want you to be late for the sacrifice, I said. I could hear Glember chuckle. The damn creature was laughing at my expense. I stumbled and struck my chin against the dry, cracked earth. I shook it off, trying to stand. I could not. I began to crawl. To the hells with Glember. I wasn't going to ask permission to stop. He'd have to suggest the break. I crawled on. I don't know how long. Glember followed. He said nothing. And soon, even crawling became difficult. Say it, damn you, I thought. Yet Glember said nothing. He walked beside me, slowly, quietly. I suddenly turned his way. The view was narrowing. I had only moments. Glember only stared at me, turning his head slightly, just as he did to the great ravine bear. Was this some kind of a game to him? Just cut my throat like the bear, I said, and it came out as a feeble whisper. "But you've no fur to offer me," Glember said calmly, and I recalled why in part I'd been as tired as I was. I'd been made to drag the bear furs he collected several days ago. He wasn't even sweating, I realized as I closed my eyes. He'd been walking with a limp still, from whatever injury he sustained, and he was carrying a heavy pack among other things, still. He seemed to tolerate it all so easily. It was as though he'd been made to sustain the heat, the travel, and the weight before. Perhaps I was wrong, I thought. I'd not change him. Where was there pity or life in those goggle eyes? This concludes part 3 of 17 of Glember, The Tale of a Monster. You're listening to the first book of the Meristherian Trilogy. Please subscribe if you like the content, where you'll have access to additional books. Feel free to support this channel by telling others about it and dropping the link on your social media sites. These books are free to listen to, as you know, and everyone's welcome here. Leave a friendly comment if you like. Again, this is AK. Thanks for listening, friends, and see you next time.